Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all here. You know, sometimes the last session of the conference, people bug out or they have to go to the airport. And I just want to thank again our partners that made this possible. California Community Colleges, Doing What Matters, the DSNs, our partner Lemelson MIT, who have been amazing, and of course all of you who have taken the time out of your schedules to be here. So we're very excited as we've been exploring the last day and a half. We've focused on entrepreneurial mindset, inventive mindset, STEM, contextualized curriculum. And one of the things we want to do in this last panel is really tie all of the threads together. One of the things that we are very fortunate to have is a very kind of robust leadership in California, which we're delighted about, but really taking a look at California and also thinking a little bit more expansively, how does that connect to initiatives that are going on in DC and in other parts of the country. So I'm thrilled to bring to this stage our next three panelists, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves to you in a moment. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our last panelists. Let's get them a round of applause, please. So as they get seated, one of the things that we've talked about this morning is really the changing workforce, where we know right now that we've been talking about the gig economy and connection economy. And our first speaker is going to talk on these things. But before we do that, I just want to have these folks take a minute. I know that most of you know them already, but I've asked them to introduce themselves and really share just a little nugget too about what they're passionate about in the area of innovation and entrepreneurship. So Tom, if you want to get started first and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Becky. Really appreciate being included in this panel. It's really an honor. I appreciate all the work of NACCE and Lemelson MIT and the State Chancellor's Office. I'm an attorney in DC, and I'm a higher education consultant. I do a lot of work with community and technical colleges over the last 20 years or so, representing statewide community technical college systems in 7 different states and individual 2-year public colleges in about 23 or 24 other states, including colleges in 4 of the California macro regions. What we focus on is putting together consortiums or combinations of different colleges in different states to create new opportunities, new programs at the national level. And we've had some pretty good successes, particularly in the last few years, in areas such as agribusiness. Some of these we'll talk a little bit about too, drones or unmanned aerial systems, and some other areas where more often than not, we're following the models that have been established by 4-year institutions over decades, and we're developing new opportunities. Not so much in the R&D sector, research and development, but more in terms of workforce development and career training. So, thank you very much.
Good. Jesse, do you want to go?
Sure. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, NACCE, for letting me be here for your invitation. So my name is Jesse Torres. 3 weeks ago, I was the governor's small business advocate for the state of California. I was also the deputy director of small business innovation with the governor's office of business and economic development. It was a fascinating role, and what the best thing about my job is that literally any business owner at any time in the state of California could call me with any kind of issue, complaint, inquiry, and they often did, because that's what entrepreneurs do. Today, I am actually the partner and chief strategy officer for a new firm, a new management consulting firm called Biltmore Group. Based in downtown LA, we focus on economic development, at least in my wheelhouse, but so finally taking my own big dip into entrepreneurship and just thinking about entrepreneurial mindset. I have 2 kids, one's 9, one's 7. And what I try to do every morning before they wake up is read for a little bit. And I've been rereading Walden by Thoreau, right? And he has this great line in there about what we really need is uncommon schools. And I was just thinking how entrepreneurs are really people that come up with uncommon approaches to things, to business and the way they live. And what I try to always do, and what I've always tried to do in my life and my work, is try to come up with uncommon approaches to the work I do and to the support I provide to people. So just want to toss that in.
That's good.
Thank you.
So Quinlivan, Executive Vice Chancellor of Workforce and Economic Development. Oh wait, no, it's Workforce and Digital Futures. And I see so many friendly faces in the room. I think we worked for many, many years putting together and putting in place a framework called Doing What Matters for Jobs and the Economy. And that has allowed us to do a lot of innovations and row together towards a common purpose and goal. And so, collectively, we've been able to go from a place where our budgets collectively have been cut, starting at $100 million, and we've gained the confidence of the state where we grew to 200 million, to 700 million, to 900 million. And broke $1 billion this year as the governor invested to extend the strong workforce regional framework down to the K-12. So really, kudos to all of you because education and making changes in education is not an individual sport, as you know. It's really a team sport. I want to recognize some members of the team out there. I see Jeff Misrick, Dean on my team here. Say hello, Jeff. Where are all my sector navigators and deputy sector navigators? Can you just say hello? Great. And then I know we have the whole CC Maker community out there. Yes, so thank you. And of course, thanks to all the faculty and administrators who are here. Without all of your hard work, we couldn't make the difference to the state and the state's economy.
Great. Well, thank you. We're delighted again to have all of you here. And Tom, we're going to start with you because I know in community colleges, over the years, there's new certificates and new areas of study, and that seems to be something that you're particularly adept at in your work. So let's talk first about cybersecurity. It is an increasing area of interest among community college leaders and others. So tell us what's happening at the federal level that might affect the role of community colleges with IT and cybersecurity.
Thank you so much, Becky. I'm going to use a few slides, mainly to stay a little bit organized if I can.
You can see them.
So, in my experience, try to advance. There we go. Should be. Most of you are probably well acquainted with the Advanced Technological Education Centers program at the National Science Foundation. And in my experience, that really has been the genesis for so many different collaborations within states, within regions, across state lines. And this is one of the areas that's really been very beneficial in terms of IT and cybersecurity. There are, of the 42, I believe, ATE centers around the country, 5 are focused on IT or cyber. 3 of those are based at community technical colleges, Whatcom Community College in Washington, Moraine Valley in Illinois, and Prince George's Community College in Maryland. And I know that the one at Prince George's includes a number of California colleges. So that's been really successful. You all probably know there's an opportunity right now for the ATE program. It's applications are due next month. The other open opportunity right now at NSF is the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace grant program. It's a little bit larger than ATE. I think it's $68 million. And the maximum award is a little bit larger at $10 million compared to 7.5 for the ATE program. So that's another really good opportunity from NSF. And again, in so many of the projects I've worked on with multi-state community college consortiums around different areas of technical training, workforce development, it started with a Centers of Excellence consortium or another combination of colleges around from an ATE program. The other one is, many of you may be looking at this opportunity through the Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeships, $150 million program. They've identified 5 priority areas, one of which is IT. And unlike the other areas where they don't go into a whole lot of detail, they do make clear that cybersecurity is a relevant area. And I know from interacting with the Office of Apprenticeships over the last year, they've already invested a fair amount in IT and cyber, so it's a strong area of interest. The one other area I'll mention is, you may have seen last month a very small program, less than $1 million to the Department of Education for the pilot program for cybersecurity education, technological upgrades for community colleges. So even though it looks small, no more than 10 projects will be funded at the nation, it really appears to be the beginning of something bigger at the Department of Education. And interestingly, that program specifically cross-references the ATE centers. In fact, you have to show that you've got support from an ATE center to be part of that. So those are the 3 different agencies I think that are good opportunities for cyber.
That's great, and Tom does have a lot of expertise. He's been very helpful to NACCE, and I think to me personally in kind of understanding how to navigate that. And you know, what I've learned in my work through NACCE is sometimes grant opportunities, you know, occur at the dean level or, you know, hire people that want to do that. But often, you know, faculty members that have an idea for a project, if you can plug in and really start to envision how that happens, it can really start from anywhere. Certainly it has to involve other people. So thank you for that, Tom. And I know we're going to kind of touch on different issues. One area that's been of particular interest to NACCE and some of our community of practice work has been with rural colleges. We have engaged in a federal grant with the Appalachian Regional Commission, working initially with 11 colleges and currently with 8 in Kentucky. And I think some of what we're seeing in terms of how do you serve agricultural communities in California, some of the maker movement, as we discussed last night, is really taking root in rural communities and can really be the lifeblood of spurring that on. So Tom, tell us a little bit about how the federal government has, you know, supported land-grant university systems and perhaps some opportunities for community colleges to get into this work and expand the impact.
Thank you, Becky. So one of the programs that was created, obviously the land-grant system is a very, very old system. 10 years ago, the 2008 Farm Bill, there was an effort to not quite level the playing field, but to create new opportunities for colleges that are not land grants, but may have robust ag or agribusiness programs and want to do more in that sector. So Congress authorized what's called the capacity building grant program for non-land grant colleges of agriculture. And unfortunately, community and technical colleges really have not benefited. There are 77 USDA certified, it's like beef, USDA certified non-land grant colleges of agriculture around the country. Anyone has a guess as to how many of those 77 are two-year public colleges? One, Vermont Technical College, my home state of Vermont, they actually award a BA in agricultural sciences. So we've met extensively with USDA about this. It's actually part of the 2014 Farm Bill that requires that you have a baccalaureate program to be receive any help from this program. So we're working on some other opportunities. We, through a consortium effort, advocated for appropriations, because that's an opportunity we have every year. Unlike the Farm Bill, it only comes around every few years. So both for last year's bill and this year's bill, we have language in there prioritizing community college agribusiness centers of excellence. It's a model that we're using for a lot of organizations. We benefited, you know, in that instance from the involvement of Bismarck State College in North Dakota. Their senior senator, John Hoeven, chairs the Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee, so that's been really helpful. Yeah, just in terms of history with the Farm Bill, as you know, more than 150 years now, the original Morrill Act, the anchor institution land grants, one for each state. 1890, during the Reconstruction era, the historically black land grants, all of them universities, no community colleges. And then 1994, the most recent innovation was for tribal land grant colleges. So we're actually working on a proposal for, we don't call it community college land grants because more than likely it'll get some resistance, but a longer term authorization for, might be called a Centers of Excellence program in agribusiness. The Farm Bill is a little bit in limbo right now. If I had to guess, I would predict it would be put off until the next Congress, but we've gotten some really good interest in that idea.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, you know, what I've learned too is it's important to keep kind of aware of some of these opportunities because they're always, even if there's a tradition of community colleges not being included, there's always that opportunity, particularly if we can come together. So Tom, just briefly, I want to touch on one other area because it's directly tied to workforce and community colleges, which directly relates to innovation and workforce training, which Jesse and Vaughn are going to talk about. But talk to us just briefly about the Maritime Workforce Program.
Down in Norfolk, Tidewater Community College really wanted to be that center of excellence for maritime workforce training. They have the largest naval base in the world and a lot going on down there. So over the years, we identified, again, an opportunity to borrow from the success of the four-year institutions. We have universities in 6 states that are designated as state maritime academies. So they're training the top brass, the merchant marine officer, the professional mariner, marine engineer. They're really not focused on skills training for either entry-level or mid-skills or jobs that for people who want to stay here in the United States and not go out on the ocean-going vessels. So more recently, in 2014, the GAO came out with a report interviewing a number of the colleges that we work with in the maritime sector, really saying to the Maritime Administration, the lead agency within the Department of Transportation, you're really missing the opportunity here. You're not training people for the numerous jobs that are potentially available in and around the ports, the inland waterways, the Great Lakes, Alaska, Hawaii. We work with those 2 state systems in connection with this opportunity. And so we proposed almost like a 2-year college counterpart to the State Maritime Academy system, but not so much training people to go out for months at a time on the ocean-going ships, but rather for jobs, both above board deck level positions, but also shoreside, underwater welding, underwater robotics, port administration, and so forth. And so very recently, the bill became a law. We got the Domestic Maritime Centers of Excellence Act was enacted. The lead agency is the Maritime Administration, the same one that runs the State Maritime Academy system, which, by the way, opposed what we tried to do. They felt that maybe they should be centers of excellence for domestic maritime, but we prevailed on that. So it's an exciting new program. Like any other, it takes time. Got to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, the Paperwork Reduction Act, and all that inside the Beltway stuff. But we've got colleges involved in that consortium from California and about 15 other states. Had a national conference in June down in Houston with community college leaders from 20 states. Even 11 people came down from Alaska. So that's a really exciting initiative that it took a little while. It took a few years to get it done, but that's now a new program that some of your colleges may want to take a look at, not only in the coastal regions, but in the inland waterways and so forth too.
Good. And I think what you said is, I know Vaughn is going to touch on this in her comments, is really not only having that foresight for what could be and what your college could plug into, but knowing that sometimes the timeline is not always what you want it to be, which is quick. It does take time for these things to kind of germinate and for the opportunities. But as we'll see, and I think as Jesse will share with us, sometimes opportunity is like a little rabbit jumping out of a hole. It's just there. So you really have to have that opportunity to respond. So on that note, Jesse, I remember meeting you at a WDI conference, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. I think Amy might have introduced us, and at that time you were doing some really interesting work in community college, and you went on to work at the governor's office. So we're interested to learn what was that interplay like? How in the state of California does the governor's office kind of interrelate to California community colleges and other workforce development partners in the ecosystem?
Sure, and that was an important conference because that's actually when I first met Vaughn for the first time when I was still there. If I recall, if it's the same one. In a previous life, I was the regional director for the Los Angeles Small Business Development Center Network, which was oversaw 3 counties, LA, Ventura, Santa Barbara counties, 9 different centers, a major program of the SBA, and we were headquartered at Long Beach City College. And so I think what made me dangerous going to work for the state was that I knew certain things. I was there at Long Beach City College, which was also the host for the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. They were running major workforce development programs. We also had Eloy Oakley as our president at that time, who then went on to become the chancellor of the community colleges. And so I was exposed to a number of different agencies, departments, people that made me realize that it was all a collaborative effort. and that certain people own certain pieces of economic development and workforce development that became very handy when I went to the state in my position, where as you try to figure out how are you going to deploy programs or services that benefit the entire state, to go into understanding that I couldn't do it alone, that it would require additional support, that we need to figure out the pathway for that kind of level of support was incredible. I mean, just for example, and so good to see Vaughn again, even around a simple thing like recognizing California's Small Business Month. Well, Vaughn was the one that created the website that we used to announce all the different events and programs that took place in the month of May. She was there at the press announcement that we made, where we also announced the Small Business Loan Guarantee Program, and they announced the Self-Employment Gig Pathways. So it became really obvious that you need to join forces with people that had shared mission, and you had to understand that the community colleges had a role. We had a role to play, EDD has a role to play, the California Workforce Development Board has a role to play, and what I think, I think I was particularly good at was trying to find common ground and common platforms that we could do shared work. The only thing I regret is that I knew I had a limited amount of time. The governor's gonna leave in a few years, so I had to focus in on one particular area. For me, that was technical assistance for small business owners, and really drilled into that. So a lot of my work was around that area, but there was room for so much more, like the makerspace movement, like things around cybersecurity that we could have done a whole lot more, but just time didn't really permit, unfortunately.
That's great. And you hit on not only the interplay, but I think kind of what you learned from the experience. And I think that's what we've talked about at this conference, and what we really encourage at NACCE is really be open to any experience. Maybe it's not the job that you wanted, or it wasn't the class that you wanted to get assigned, or the role, but be open to it, because you can learn from it, and every experience gives you that knowledge of figuring out how to connect the dots. And Jesse, as you're kind of entering into this new chapter of life for two weeks or whatever, you're actually becoming an entrepreneur. So in your role prior, you were actually supporting entrepreneurs and doing all of this good work. So tell us about what you're doing and how you kind of envision the knowledge that you had, and really opportunities to support innovation, either through the work that you're doing or others who might join the effort to kind of move things along.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I think that one of the things I was really good at was developing big programs supporting particularly small businesses or in the economic development space. So the last thing I was able to do when I left the governor's office was create a $100 million fund that supports all the federal small business programs that operate in the state. So the SBDCs, women business centers, so that they have funds to expand the capacity of their work. And so what I'm doing right now with my current firm is really just taking that expertise around big program developments and beyond just the strategy around implementation. What I'm noticing out there is that it's easy to go to somebody and say, well, if you really want to run an effective program targeting minority entrepreneurs in South LA, here are 5 steps to do it. But sometimes people need support in actually taking those steps. They don't know the right people. They don't know how to actually have an effective meeting. They don't know what kind of materials to use, and so they need help just really kind of moving that all forward. But I think what I'm also really good at is just connecting people and making that kind of strategic effort happen in partnership with partners. So I'm excited. I think I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad was he had his own barbershop for many years. My parents came to the United States in the 60s with no money. They didn't speak the language. And so when I think about, if I wake up ever feeling nervous, I think about them and the sacrifices they made. And I think if they, I have it easy because I had an education and support and friends, a network, and they didn't have any of that. So I also take a lot of, inspiration from my wife. She left her company of 17 years last year and started her own event production company that has done well. So it's her fault because she inspired me and to take that big leap based on her success. So we are family and entrepreneurs, at my house, and so it's exciting.
Yeah, it's a family affair.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. And I love what you said about being, looking at your family and the lessons and the opportunity, and I think taking risks. And I think, I hope through the work that we do that more people will do that. And, that's kind of the transition point into, I guess, too, a risk that I took professionally. And Vaughn helped me with it, so I'm going to ask her some questions about that. But a couple of years ago, actually, Amy Schultz and I were working on the conference, and we said, we need to reach out to Chancellor Madeline Pumariega in Florida, because we were going to be in Florida. We got to get on her schedule. And so we had this great call, and she's this dynamic lady from Miami who's done all this amazing work. And she said, yes, I'll speak at your conference, and that was great. And then she called me like a couple months later. She said, well, there's something that you can do for me. And I said, absolutely, what can I do for you? And she said, well, I want you to be the editor of this new book about entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh my God, I have a full-time job. I have 2 kids. And I said, well, of course I'll do it. And then I hung up the phone and I was like, oh my gosh, what did I agree to do? I don't know how to do this. But in true entrepreneurial fashion, what do? You reach out to your friends, you reach out to the people that you highly regard. And Quinlivan was one of the first people that I thought of, because I know the work that you've been doing in this state. I know it's not been easy. The rest of the country kind of looks at you as innovators and leaders, but when you get into the weeds of dealing with the business office and the IT and all that stuff, it's hard. And so one of the things that I knew from my friends in California is about all that innovation. So I reached out to Vaughn and about 10 other people and said, I want you to write about what your story is and tell us, because what we need to do as a community and as a movement is prepare that next generation of leaders, whether they are deans, as many of you sitting in this room that I hope will step up to the challenge and become a community college president at some point, because it's sometimes you look at that as a goal, but what does that mean? That means you have to be an entrepreneur. You need to be courageous and you need to take risks. So that was kind of sort of the genesis of the book. And as we've kind of gone through the journey, and I followed Vaughn on social media, so I kind of feel like I spend every day with her sometimes and learn about what she's done. But one of the things, as we talk a little bit about her journey that's been important, is clearly the adoption of an entrepreneurial mindset. So I wanted you to share a little bit, Vaughn, about how you yourself have adopted an entrepreneurial mindset and why you think that's important for all of us in this room.
Well, unlike Jesse, who has the big E as an entrepreneur, I think I have the little e in terms of entrepreneurial mindset. It always roots into the fact that we're trying to solve some problem, right? I remember back when I was at PG&E, and I had this great role, which was a special assistant right hand to the chairman and CEO of this company of 20,000 men and women. And as I was navigating through the organization trying to get things done, I kept hearing this complaint that it was not possible to get quality, diverse candidates for these really high, good-paying occupations. And that bothered me at the core. As first generation coming to the United States, I knew there were many, many, many communities. If they understood that these jobs and these careers existed, they would do a lot to be able to position themselves for these great careers. And so I took the entrepreneurial mindset and actually pitched to the CEO of the company and the new incoming SVP of HR, and it was a one-page plan. So this is like the techniques that you live with, right? And said, look, I'm going to prove to you that we can get quality, diverse, and reliable workforce pipeline, but we're going to do it in a different way. We're going to do it by relying on the public infrastructure in order to create this pipeline. And then, I can't believe I did this, I went from the 29th floor with all glass walls, view of the Bay Bridge, a lot of snacks on the outside. And then I went down to the second floor. It was so dark. It was like the cave. I don't think they even gave us light bulbs down there. So I was in the depth of HR, right, doing this work. But I believed in it so strongly that I needed to prove to the company that it can be done. And the company went from a place where it had no opinion in workforce development to becoming a nationally recognized best practice in about a 2-year time frame. And so I think, even in this position, when I came in, I heard from many of you, and when I started asking the question about the problem, what was the problem? The problem was that for at least 10 years, the career technical education portfolio was eroding, right? And whether the state gave more money or less money was proportionally just going down. And so what were the problems? And so as I heard back from all of you, whether it was money, was curriculum approval time, whether we couldn't have enough CTE faculty in place, I mean, all of those opinions really came together, and we just stayed on working those problems. But in order to actually make sense of all of that, do the sense making, we gave it a common name, right? And so I mean, maybe the entrepreneurship is how to package all of those thoughts and wisdom of the field, and that's how we came up with doing what matters for jobs and economy, so that it could be a unifying framework for us to have collective action.
That's great. And when you talk about unification and brand, one of the most humorous things about working for NACCE is the colorful characters that are part of our membership. And certain states, like Florida, for example, they tease because they're jealous, essentially, of the Deputy Sector Navigator title, because it kind of has sort of that superhero kind of connotation to it. So I know there's been some friendly kind of back and forth, but on more serious tone, I think what it did is it elevated the importance of the work that you all do in connecting the dots, which is what Vaughn was talking about and Jesse was talking about, which is very important. And Vaughn, you spoke a little bit about your lessons on the corporate side, and just having the courage to go from the high loft to really the depths of the organization to prove what could be possible. And when you were sort of collecting your thoughts for your chapter of the book that Stylus is publishing, The Power of Collective Action, a 5-year journey. 5 years seems like a long time, but it's not sometimes in the entrepreneurial process. And I know that you're going to speak a little bit about what you're doing, but I'd like for you to maybe share with the audience a couple of the takeaways through that 5 years, what you've learned through engaging in this meaningful way, and maybe things that we could take away back to our, communities and try to implement. So I don't know if a few of them come to mind that you'd like to share with us.
So at the heart of what has been built out across California is really an ecosystem of innovation. Right? We had a lot of hierarchical networks in a campus, and normally when we get something done, it's through, does the CEO agree of your campus, and then from then it cascades. However, we understood that there's a cycling of CEOs. They were staying in position maybe less than 3 years. And if employers came and began to do work with our colleges, and then the CEO left, then they're starting from scratch, which frustrates the employer. So then what was the problem we were trying to solve? We were trying to solve this problem of creating an ecosystem that was much more resilient, not dependent on a single person, right? And that's able to carry to fruition these workforce programs that the economy needed, and that is good for social mobility. And if you think about hierarchical models, right, a hierarchical is a central point of control, right? And so when change is happening, it's a bit more of a rigid structure. But in an ecosystem structure where, hey, there's a regional network, or there's a sector network, or there's a CCC maker network, or there are other networks that we're connecting folks in, you never know where the innovation comes from. And so, let me do some quick call outs. Like the work that Amy had done with a number of our colleagues to experiment with badging and trying to solve this problem of soft skills. Like how do students how do we get the employers to stop complaining about the lack of soft skills in students, right? And so when they launched the New World of Work, and we seeded also badging, experimentation with badging, the great news was that Apple, when they saw those 10 skills, pointed to them and said, this is exactly what we hired for. And as a result, 8 Apple retail stores paired with 8 of our colleges in their retail management certificate and degree to stair-step students through a capstone process, and then given a private URL to hire, right? So wonderful innovation, and now badging, which was the first time we tried that, because now the employer could badge the students if they saw the evidence of those skills, and the faculty could do that. Now we're beginning to experiment with the badging in many other ways. And so the replication of that practice superseded that particular project. On the regional scale, 2 weeks ago, the 19 community colleges of LA announced a partnership with Amazon to go into cloud computing. That is nothing short of a miracle, folks. So for those of you who understand the dynamics of LA, I think it's this big personality in a kind of a landlocked area, and so there's a lot of fighting all the time. The fact that these 19 community colleges got together, and not only are they offering the cloud computing degree, but all 19 colleges are committing to stair-step their high school students into this industry value credential. And did this all in a decentralized way. We didn't have to do anything at the central level. We invested in the ecosystem. And part of the ecosystem is also beyond our own internal campuses, right? The point of the spear actually came from the LA Economic Development Corporation, Bill Allen, where he aggregated the employers, 200 to 800 employers for every single industry sector that region cared about. So he's speaking from the voice of the employer. He also married his economists with our labor market researchers. So he was speaking with data. And so when he met with our 19 community colleges, he laid out what the employers needed, what the data said, and that helped our 19 presidents take the risk. This is all about risk management, right? So context setting is very important in this ecosystem. Build and cultivate the ecosystem with the right talent, and then set the context so that the ecosystem can flourish. And like all ecosystem, as things change, the biodiversity actually helps us survive and adapt much better to a changing environment than if we were all homogeneous. And so that's why we've seeded so many networks out there and cultivated so many networks.